So when we first came up with the idea of Black Sea, the first thing that we did, practically speaking, was to find the real submarine that we shot all the interiors in. And it's an old rusting hulk of a 1960s Soviet submarine. The outside it looks terrible, but the inside is kind of pristine and wonderful. So the Union team put together various tests for us, and we then set them off really to create the whole exterior world of the sub.
The visual effects team were brought on board to handle the creation of a CG submarine and the ocean environments that it sails in. We based the building of our submarine almost entirely from the Black Widow, although we did need to make some basic structural changes, such as patching up holes. At the end of the day, CG in a film of this nature has to feel real, and this is always a challenge, because everything that we were dealing with was based on something real, from the sub through to the canyons, and we had gathered such a huge collection of reference material. We knew that we were going into this with a level of confidence.
We crucially had to make a change to that sub, and it was specifically to do with the conning tower, because we wanted to have a sequence where Jude stood on the top of the conning tower and sort of said his farewell to the world before they went underwater for the last time. And the conning tower on our submarine did not have an open conning tower at the top. It had a sort of enclosed one, and it just didn't look very good. So Union sliced off the top of the conning tower, changed the shape of it slightly, and put digitally the correct kind of open conning tower that we wanted on.
Anything in direct proximity of the sub was calculated as a fluid simulation. This included the ocean surface, white water, bubbles, mist and wet maps. The final output provided us with a physically correct ocean environment with unlimited control.
The biggest challenge we faced when it came to compositing the underwater submarine shots was bringing all these different elements and layers into the right balance. The marine snow particles, for example, which were essential in creating the feeling that the submarine was displacing water as it moved along. The density of the water, the texture of the submarine itself, and what colors it would keep that deep underwater.
As we did our research, I stumbled across some photographs of the Black Canyon in Colorado, which is apparently one of the steepest canyons in the world. The images immediately struck me as something that could be a really good starting point for building our underwater canyon terrain. The final look of the shots ended up being quite a fine balance between a few different elements. So you've got a layer of particulate matter, you've got the depth perception, how far do you see underwater before it just falls off into darkness. I suppose, in a way, that in itself played a big sort of character type role in terms of how much you disguise and how much that contributes to an overall sense of the unknown.
Technically, the most complicated sequence in the film is the underwater dive sequence, which is kind of the centerpiece of the movie. It lasts for about 15-20 minutes.
When we started on the project, it was quite clear that these shots weren't going to be achieved for real. So we were brought on board at an early stage to help realise these shots. The first thing we did when going about this was to pre-visualise all these sequences in CG.
The previews were sort of essential for what we ended up doing in the tank. It's not, I mean, it seems quite big when you're in there, but putting a piece of a submarine in there, suddenly that bit of submarine isn't a huge piece.
We were able to put, okay, this is a real bit of set that we're going to have in our tank, and everything else is CG, and here we're going to have green screen, etc., etc. So that was the tool that or the Bible that we followed when we were shooting that very complicated underwater sequence.
In addition to the submarine and diving shots, there were a number of other sequences that we were called on to help out with, such as explosions, for example. This went from augmenting practical explosions inside the sub, including underwater scenes involving actors but filmed without the explosions, up to actually seeing the explosions burst through the side of the sub whilst it's sailing underwater, the final of which led to a substantial crash landing on the surface of the ocean, all of which was entirely CG.
There were obviously a host of other VFX shots which Union did in the film, more normal kind of stuff, clean-up stuff, some explosions, a very dramatic explosion that there is in the middle of the movie, and many other things.